Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you've already subscribed, thank you. If you haven't, make sure to subscribe so you see all the newest content as soon as it's released on my channel. Today, I'm going to be talking to you guys a little bit about the process of moving to Seattle and how to make your trip and move here as simple, efficient, and effective as possible. So that's why I'm here today, to help you get through the process so that you can make the best choices for your move here. Before we get to all the details though, I think it's really important that we discuss the pros and cons, the rumors, the truths and non-truths about Seattle. So let's jump right into it. Let's start with rain. Is it as bad as everyone makes it out to be? My personal opinion is that it's really not that bad. I find that Seattle rain is like a drizzle, it's like a mist. Like when you go to Disneyland and you get into the misters to cool you down, that's what it's like most of the time. Most people here don't even use umbrellas or raincoats. Maybe they'll wear a jacket with a hood and that's sufficient. I think what most people have a problem with more though is how overcast Seattle can get, especially in the winter. I mean, I used to live in Southern California and the sun year round got kind of a little bit too much for me. I like having the variety in weather and the changes and having the leaves change color. It feels like Christmas, it feels like Thanksgiving. This is what I like, but to some people they like sun year round, so you'll have to figure that out for yourself. Next, we have homelessness and crime. I think there's this big issue with homelessness now across all the major cities in America. Even in the 90s, when I was growing up, there were still a ton of homeless people here. I think the problem though is the drug addictions that have been creeping up. I think that's more of an issue. How I personally feel about it is, yeah, it's a give and take in every major city. You live in a major city, you're gonna have to deal with more things like that than in the suburbs. But the current state of Seattle right now, I really don't feel like it's that big of a deal as of now. I have to admit, during Chaz and the protest period, it was pretty bad. And even a little bit before that, the homelessness and the insanity that surrounded having that kind of presence in the city and the drug addiction got kind of annoying. But right now, I walk outside and I barely even see any homeless people, and I don't see drugs, I don't see needles like everyone is making it out to be right now. I'm not saying that it might not turn out like that in a year, 2, 5 years, whatever, but as of this moment, I don't see that. And even when it was at its peak, I rarely felt like I was going to be killed or attacked. You kind of learn the areas of the city to avoid and to be more aware of not going into those areas where you're at risk. And that's with any city you live in. Cost of living. Yes, it's one of the more expensive cities in America, but compared to all the major cities in America with a lot of jobs and job growth, Seattle is not bad. I've lived in multiple expensive cities. I've traveled to the majority of expensive cities in America, and Seattle is not that bad. The food cost is not as crazy as some of these other cities. The housing cost is not as crazy as some of the bigger cities in America. And in general, transportation and things like that is much more affordable, especially compared to San Francisco or New York, for instance. Mark my words, the cost of living is manageable, especially because you'll probably be paid a lot more here than you would in most other cities in America. Traffic, transportation, and how easy it is to get around in Seattle is a very interesting topic. For some people, they find that Seattle has a great transportation system. For others, they feel like it's not good enough. I personally have lived in other cities that have a horrible commute, like LA, for instance, or New York. I haven't lived in New York, but I've traveled there. And Seattle, I think, is a sweet spot. It's not, as open and free as, let's say, Kansas City or St. Louis, but for a major city, there's still a lot of freedom to drive, and there's a lot of public transportation that you can take. We have the light rail, we have buses, we have trolleys, we have a water taxi. You just have to get your mind in the mindset that, you live in a big city, so it's not going to be like living in a small town where there's no population or traffic. The reason why I say to me it's not a big deal is because I've been in other cities where if you don't have a car, or if your car is not dependable, like it breaks down all the time, you're so screwed. But in Seattle, you can get mostly anywhere on the bus or light rail or trolley system, or a combination of everything. Uber and Lyft is always an option. I honestly don't use Uber and Lyft that often even. You know, I live in the city and I do drive, I have a car, but most of the time I prefer taking the light rail or the bus or the trolley to get around the city. It's actually a lot easier. And that's because Seattle has a pretty good infrastructure around that. But if you go out of the city, it's probably better to take a car. And that's where Seattle is very unique. You can still own a car here. It's not impossible to own a car here. It's not, when I say impossible, I'm determining by price and affordability of owning a car here. In other cities, it's out of the question. It's expensive here to own a car, but it's still doable. You can still own a car so that you can have more freedom on the weekends if you want to go hiking, like 30 minutes out of the city, or go to a friend or someone's house who's a little bit further away and you don't have to pay, $30 for your Uber or Lyft. The one thing that sets Seattle apart from some of the other major cities when it comes to public transportation is the cost of it. It's really not that expensive compared to other cities. For instance, San Francisco, oh man, the cost of taking the BART is ridiculously high compared to Seattle. And if you're low income, there's also programs that help support in your cost to pay for bus passes or light rail passes. Food and coffee. Coffee's everywhere, and there's a lot of great coffee shops here. You don't have to go to Starbucks, but you can choose to go to Starbucks if that's what you want. There's a lot of variety of food in Seattle. The one thing about Seattle I'll say though is that not every type of food here is as good as some of the other cities. For instance, Mexican food is not amazing. There's some good places, but there's not a lot of amazing places. Or barbecue. I think barbecue here is very lacking. There's definitely barbecue here, you'll find it, but it's definitely not the same as if you were gonna go to the South or the Midwest. So there are things like that where you have to compromise a little bit, but you will find what you need and you'll find a good enough option. I've been to other cities where, yeah, there are options, but they were horrible. Seattle is a pretty healthy-minded city, and that's probably a double-edged sword, right? Because to some people that's great, to other people, not so much. For instance, I like junk food. I like McDonald's. I like Jack in the Box. I like all these, fast food places. So for me, it kind of sucks that I don't have that option as much in the city because there's not a lot of fast food places in the downtown area or surrounding neighborhoods. But to someone who doesn't care about that, it's great because there's a lot more healthy options in the city. But I have to say, just because there's not a lot does not mean that there's none. You can still get fast food and junk food in the city. Just go to the south end of the city. Right outside of downtown, you'll have a whole area with every single fast food place you can think of in the Soto area. So it's not impossible. It's just not directly out your door if you live in the city. Diversity is a big factor for a lot of people in where they choose to live, especially nowadays. Seattle has a lot of diversity, but the diversity here is a little bit different. And I know that because I've lived in other places and I have a way to compare. Seattle has a lot of Asian people, and that's what makes this city very diverse. But the population of African Americans and Latino is a little bit smaller than some of the other major cities. Whereas somewhere like LA, for instance, has a very balanced amount of different types of ethnicities and cultures, right? Seattle's very, very predominantly white, I would say, and Asian. But there is a growing Black and Hispanic community that has been increasing over the years. But that doesn't mean that Seattle's not an accepting city. The people here are very accepting, and the culture here is very conducive to diversity. So you'll feel like you fit in. You won't feel like you're being discriminated every corner you go to or you're being judged. There are pockets of the state that are very not tolerant, I would say, but most of the greater Seattle area and surrounding neighborhoods are fine. The arts and entertainment scene in Seattle. Seattle is very artsy. Seattle has been known for its jazz and music scene and a lot of alternative art and media. So in that way, you'll be able to find your, tribe if you look for it. So that's not a big concern. Entertainment-wise, Seattle has everything that every other major city has. prior to COVID, it had, clubs, bars, everything. Although the club and bar scene here is a little bit different than some of the other cities. And it's even different now compared to what it used to be in the early 2000s and prior to that. I was introduced to the bars and club scene in Seattle in the early 2000s. So I've seen it changed quite a bit. I would say that people nowadays at bars and clubs don't, dance or get as crazy. People are a lot more reserved nowadays. And I don't know if it's because the people who are moving into the city now have a different taste or a different perspective on how they like to, go out and have fun. But back in the early 2000s, Seattle was crazy. It was no different than LA or New York when you stepped into a bar or a club. Now I feel like people stand around a lot more and kind of just chill. So you'll find a lot more dive bars here now. But there are still dance clubs, so you can still find that. It's just not as prominent as it was in the early 2000s here. And I think the culture and the DNA of Seattle is changing to accommodate for, who's moving here. I haven't been able to pinpoint what that culture, right, or the new DNA of Seattle really is yet, but I guess we'll see. COVID obviously killed the whole party scene, but we'll see what happens when, the pandemic is over. A big topic is the Seattle freeze, right? And the dating life here and such. Honestly, I agree. People here aren't as forthcoming and aren't as, how do I put this, out there as you would expect from, cities like New York, Miami, LA, San Francisco. But I don't necessarily think that people here are so cold that you couldn't make friends or get to know them. The problem is that people in Seattle expect you to put effort in. It's a two-way street. You got to put effort so that they can put effort too. It's not a one-way street where they're going to come up to you out of nowhere and just want to be instant BFFs with you. And I think that comes with not necessarily because it's cold here or whatever here. I don't necessarily know where that's coming from, but having grown up here, I don't find it to be a huge burden, to be honest, because I'm very outgoing, so I have no problem going up to people, making friends, and if someone doesn't want to be my friend, so be it. Move on, right? But if you're the type of person who's afraid of, confronting someone, even just to make friends, then yeah, you might have some issues. But I think that it's healthy for you to break out of that shell anyway, right? You can't go through life being afraid to approach people. So Seattle is a perfect testing ground and training ground for you to break out of your shell. So that's how I feel about the Seattle freeze here. I've never had an issue making friends. All right, so now that you kind of have a little bit of an idea about what Seattle really is like, let's jump into where to live and how to choose where to live. My rules for choosing where to live falls into, certain criteria, like the food you want to eat, the restaurants you want to go to, the bars and clubs you want to frequent, things like that. Is public transportation convenient for where you want to live to get to and from where you need to go? And is it safe? Is it in the right price point? So those are all the criteria that you have to think about. I always look at where I'm working first. And then I also look at where do I want to live? And then I kind of balance those two things out. For instance, if your job is in the middle of the city in downtown Seattle and you want to live there, great. But if your job is in downtown Seattle, but you want to live in another neighborhood outside, you have to think about the commute and how easy or not it is to get to and from, right? Or how affordable it is, because there might be some tolls. I always kind of say, you're already at work all day. Do you really want to be right next to work the rest of the day too? So you have to balance that. Maybe you just live 10, 15 minutes away from work. It's going to be a little bit better, so you feel like you're getting away a little bit. But I don't like to live too far from where I work, because then it's kind of a nightmare, because I'm not a person that wakes up 2 hours before to get ready to go to work. And because Seattle does experience traffic during, peak hours, I really don't want to stress every single day if I'm going to be late to work. I always recommend that, live a little bit further away from work, but not too far, where it's going to be an inconvenience to get to work, right? Public transportation is really important. If you live somewhere that's near a light rail station, you're not going to have to worry about traffic too much. If you live near a bus station, you still might have to worry about traffic, because sometimes the bus gets stuck in the inner city lanes. I've had a job before where I've had to depend on a bus, and it would take me an additional 40 minutes just to get home during peak hours, whereas it would have been like 15 minutes without traffic. So be aware of that. I always say stay with a light rail station or access to a light rail station, because it's going to be the most congestion proof method to get to and from work. A lot of companies here also have shuttles that are free for employees. So if you have that, that helps too, but you'll still deal with congestion, unfortunately. Living close to grocery stores, the kind of grocery stores that you want to shop at, in places like Target or things like that, is really important. If you're a big shopper and you want to live closer to the mall, great, pick something that's closer to that. I say that because it's really annoying to go grocery shopping if it's clear across town from you. You're gonna get lazy and end up eating out a lot more than you need to. So pick wisely. Know what kind of food you want, what kind of grocery stores will accommodate that, and live near it. The other thing that I would recommend too is make it kind of like a hybrid, right? If you're someone who is going to eat out a certain amount of days in the week and only going to cook a certain amount of days, and you don't need to buy stuff all the time, then maybe it is okay for you to live closer to the restaurant scenes that you like, and then a little bit further away from the grocery store that you would ideally shop at. But if you eat a lot at home and cook a lot at home, I would live closer to the grocery store than the restaurant scene. Another big topic that people always look at is safety. And I think this is one of those topics that is and opinions and perspectives that are very subjective and very personal. There are a lot of gentrifying areas in Seattle that are very affordable to live in, that are fun to live in, but to some people it might not be safe or safe enough. For instance, if you have children and you want a specific type of neighborhood, you wouldn't go to a newly gentrifying place that, kids probably should be out at night. But for a 20-something-year-old who likes having adventure and who likes having bars and clubs and things like that around, and it's not the most refined neighborhood, but that's what makes it enjoyable and unique and fun, right? Then it's right for you. So you have to look into that neighborhood and see what the culture of that neighborhood is like, and if it's going to accommodate for what you need or want, or is it going to make you feel safe or unsafe, right? Because for me, I didn't mind living in International District, even though there were, at times homeless people walking around, and they might be, a little bit belligerent, but they kept to themselves, and I was okay with that. And of course, price point. That's a huge factor for a lot of people, right? Of course, there are neighborhoods we'd love to live in, but we might not be able to afford it. Luckily in Seattle, I have to say, I've been able to live in most neighborhoods I've wanted to. You'll have to compromise a little bit on the space you get, how new or old that space will be, or if there's gonna be parking or not, things like that. But even when I was making significantly less money as a college student, or a new college graduate making much less, I was still able to live in Capitol Hill. And even as I made more money, I was living in International District. So I think that price point is something that's important, that could be a barrier, but it's not impossible. If you really want to live in a specific neighborhood, you will be able to find that spot in that neighborhood for you. You just have to do a little bit of homework and digging. That's actually the nice thing about Seattle, is even in a very bougie, expensive neighborhood, there are still very moderate price homes and housing that you can rent. Like for instance, in the middle of downtown, yes, rent is really high here, but they also have more older, charming, and moderately priced apartments that you can rent here. There's also a lot of income based pricing for these high rises even. So you just have to look and take the time and do your due diligence to dig in a little bit more, and also be willing to compromise, right? Like if you have a budget of a certain amount, you want to live in a certain neighborhood, then make sure that you're okay with living in something that's a little bit older. Keep your expectations realistic, and you'll be able to live anywhere in the city. So then the question is, where do you look for these homes? What are the best outlets to find a good value for Seattle? I like to look on Facebook Marketplace, Zillow.com rentals, and also Craigslist. It depends on what you're looking for. I found a lot of luck on Facebook Marketplace, but it depends on what's on the market right then and there and who's listing it on there. Craigslist is hit or miss to me. There are times where I've found really, really good deals, but lately it's been a little bit sketch. So I can see why a lot of people have been moving away from looking at Craigslist. But a lot of owner-owned properties are only listed in places like Facebook or Craigslist, just because it's a lot easier. They don't have to go through a lot of fees or middleman to list it there. Sometimes you find a really good deal, and renting from someone who owns the property themselves is a little bit better than a corporate landlord, just because they don't often increase the prices a lot, and even when they do, it's a small portion, and they'll be willing to work with you more to try to keep you in the home longer. So I would check that out first. But Zillow.com, the rental section is actually really good. I've had a lot of success there, and there's been a lot of movement of landlords going to Zillow.com now to list their homes. So I would also check that place too. A lot of the best rental deals are through people you know who are giving up a rental, or a roommate's moving out and they're looking for someone new. So make some friends. Another key thing about moving here also is the method you're going to move here. Are you going to need a moving truck, or are you going to ship stuff here? You want to pick a place that's close to post office or where you can ship things to and from really easily. The other thing too is, if you're moving with a mover, make sure that you're vetting with your apartment to see if they have a loading dock or somewhere to park for the moving truck. One thing I ran into in the past is the building I moved into didn't have a big enough loading dock for a truck that's bigger than 14 feet. So who I used to move my stuff was really crucial, because they needed to have a truck that was under 14 feet. So make sure to look at those details, or you're going to run into a lot of headaches, because if your truck cannot park near your building or access your freight elevator, you're going to run into some issues. If you're moving to Seattle, look into Eco Movers. I've used them twice now and plan on using them again and again, because they have great prices, great service, and they're very dependable. Not only that, but they have trucks in various sizes that can accommodate for almost any building here in Seattle. The other thing I suggest is, if there's stuff that you don't really feel attached to or don't really spark joy for you, I'd say, then just get rid of it. The more things you take with you, the more it costs to move, right? Whether you're shipping it or you're having movers move it for you. It takes time, and time is money when it comes to moving. So if you feel like you can replace it fairly easily and affordably, then I would just get rid of it. Sell it off, give it away, donate it, and then repurchase it if you need it again later. I found that there's things I've gotten rid of and I didn't actually buy again, because I realized I just had it because I needed it that one time and I never needed it anymore. So look through your stuff and get rid of things that you don't actually need before you move. Here's a little freebie. I'm the type of person who's very particular about how I decorate my home and where I buy things that I need for my house. Seattle is great for that. There are a lot of places where you can buy home decor, things you need in the home, bedding, things like that, for very great prices and great quality. And it's all over the city. So I live in the middle of the city, and there's a Home Goods here, there's a TJ Maxx here, there's a Ross here, there's a Marshall's right out of the city a little bit, but plenty of stuff like that around the city for you to buy at Target. I always recommend Home Goods. They have a great furniture and great home decor and home goods that you can buy, and it's always high quality, and the prices are very competitive, even competitive to Amazon prices. TJ Maxx is another place that has things like that, and so is Ross. You can easily get one of those hourly car rentals, car to go kind of things, and go 15 minutes out of the city and buy all your stuff and come back, and you're good to go. FYI guys, as you can see, the sun is setting in the city right now, so it's getting a little bit darker. So I'll be taking a break and ending part 1 of my moving to Seattle video with tips and tricks here. In part 2, I'll be taking you guys on tours around the city and neighborhoods around the city that I think would be great for anyone who's moving to Seattle for the first time. Make sure to share, like, and subscribe so you'll be first to see part 2 and other content that I'll be posting. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys soon.